What's this supposed to be?
Looks sort of like a Parcheesi game or something.
I know what this is. I mean, I've never seen one like this before. It's a Ouija board.
Well, how do you play? Don't you need dice or something?
You don't play. The Ouija board is a tool for communication.
Communication with who?
The dead.
Thanks for tuning in. I recently talked to Frank Farel, who is a writer, producer, director, and actor, and has been a part of some of the films that essentially made me who I am. We talk a little bit about screenwriting. We talk about some behind the scenes events that happened making his movies, and a sequel to one of those movies. I hope you enjoy Frank and his new beard. Here you go.
Come on, Megan, it's spooky as hell inside.
We're coming!
Okay, awesome. How you doing today?
I'm pretty good. I'm a little frantic. I got the past few days got pretty busy with a lot of things. Let's see. You should be proud. You're the first people to see me with what most people will think is a COVID beard, but is not. It's actually due to a request from a female of the species. So what can I do?
Yeah, I totally get that.
So how are you, and what would you like to talk about?
Okay. Well, it was really interesting whenever you kind of hit me up on Facebook and we were just chatting. And then I was like, is this the Frank? So I went and
the Frank.
I went and checked your profile, and I was like, oh wow, that is him. Okay, cool. And then you had mentioned to me to go and watch your movies, and I'm like, well, yeah, I grew up with those,
Right. See, I never know when people ask me to friend them on Facebook. I have no idea if they know who I am or they're just adding another notch to their belt.
Well, because in your profile photo, aren't you holding a copy of Street Trash?
Yeah, I mean, if you see the page, plus like on the left, it'll basically say there's Spookies, Street Trash.
Yeah.
So if you look, you can figure it out. But a lot of people get a hold of me, and then I say, hey, check out my movies, and then like a day later, it'll be like, oh, I had no idea you were this guy. I love those movies.
Yeah. So basically, I just want to talk to you a lot about screenwriting and about about your involvement in some of these crazy movies that you've been in.
Sure.
So how did you first get into the business?
I became like seriously a movie fan, I guess, more than the average human, maybe when I was 11, 12 years old, and I started to become more interested. And and at the time, this was basically the movies that were in the theaters, but it was also movies that were on TV, which were mostly movies made like a generation or more before I was born. So I had this great love of almost everything that's like I would say like pre-80s or so.
Yeah, and so did you want to like get into it as an actor, or did you want to write?
I wound up doing like a little bit of everything, and I've done that all through my career, meaning I've done acting, I've done writing. Writing and directing and producing have been more of my central area, but I think like a lot of people in the film business, it's like you sort of like to think that you're versatile enough that you can do everything. And I have an interest in everything, and I tried to learn everything to some degree. I mean, I managed movie theaters at one time and booked like repertory art house theaters, and I worked in distribution for United Artists at one time. So I wanted, in my earliest jobs, I tried to get like this big, wide background, so I really understood the business, and I loved it. So it was like, it was hardly work in many cases.
So what was the first thing you got into when it comes to screenwriting? What was the first thing you did?
I started writing scripts in my teens. I had written like my first feature script by the time I was 18 or so. It never got made, of course, but I think, I sort of understood this at a relatively early age. And nowadays it's a lot more common because, I mean, young people have access to technology that, we could have barely dreamed of. They see everybody else can, they see anybody can make a movie, and anybody can. But, at the same time, I mean, you're a writer. I mean, anybody can write something. Anybody can write a book. Anybody can write a story. But the person with talent or a viewpoint or something to say or something that's above average will usually, hopefully, stand out.
Yeah. And going back and revisiting Spookies and Street Trash, Spookies, like I have no idea how I didn't know this, that it was such like it has such a troubled past,
God, yes.
So much so that there's a documentary on the Blu-ray.
Spookies is like the probably the worst thing that happened to me during my lifetime. Meaning the actual bullshit that we went through during the film, and then the fact that because of the fact that we felt like we could not lay claim to the film after it was taken apart and put back together and things. I mean, and our scenes were everything was shot that remained in the movie is like still drastically wrongly cut, poorly framed in terms of the other footage. It's just a mess. I was for years, and this goes for, I have two partners, Brendan Faulkner and Tom Doran, who were the directors that co-directed Spookies. And I continued to work for years afterwards with Tom, who I still feel is one of the most talented people I've ever known. But, I mean, you sort of have to realize that we got brought into that project, and it was like, all right, we had scripts at that time that we were trying to raise money for. Michael Lee, who was the head of Vipco Video in England, big, home video company, still beloved to this day. He was just looking for somebody he could get a film made by in the USA. But it was more, how can I put it? It was more like, it was roughly on the level of like, oh, I want 15 pounds of bologna. How thinly can you cut it? It's like he knew what he wanted. He knew how much he wanted. He knew how he wanted it. It was just a matter of whether we could do it, and he wanted to pay that price. Meanwhile, we wanted to make an amazing movie.
Yeah.
And we had other scripts that we had started to do work with. We had done a promo short for a project called Hellspawn, which was another, old house type of a thriller with this time with one central monster. And we got as far as, building the monster and some of the props and getting, students had about 7 or 8 minutes of a promo shot when he came along. He looked at that and he said, no, I don't want to do this. I want something that's more like The Evil Dead. And essentially what he wanted was like a movie where people go to teenagers, of course, it's always teenagers. It has to be teenagers. But he wanted a movie where people go to a house and it's like, oh, and then they go into a closet and a monster pops out. And then, they run downstairs into the basement and there's a trapdoor and a monster pops out. And so, we went home that night thinking, oh, great. I think we're going to make a movie about things popping out of things. Because that's his mentality. He didn't particularly like movies. He definitely didn't like horror movies, although they made him rich. He looked down, I think, on his audience. And I don't know. And I know his company is still beloved to this day because that's how a lot of people in the UK and England saw so many horror movies.
Yeah.
But Michael was a mercenary.
Yeah.
He was the dollar was his bottom line, and he would, on the one hand, say, I don't know anything about filmmaking. You're the guys that know. But the minute he felt a moment of insecurity or uncertainty, suddenly he knew everything and he could start dictating.
Yeah.
And that's, to an extent, what happened to the film.
Yeah, I watched a clip somewhere on YouTube. It was somebody involved with the movie, and they said that the best the best part of the movie was the actual script. And if y'all were able to shoot that script, then y'all would have had a great movie. But then,
I mean, I'll qualify that by saying I don't know if it would have been a great movie. Bear in mind, we wrote this to his specifications, meaning we had many sessions just sitting with him and talking through what he wanted to be in the movie, and we would try and suggest things and steer this way or do that. But we couldn't talk him out of certain things. Like we didn't want to make an outright blatant ripoff of a film like The Evil Dead. I don't think like that. He wanted to. That was his plan. We did what we could to sort of turn it into a slightly different type of an atmosphere and setting, but those are part of the parameters that we were bound by in that. And then, and at every stage, the writing, the pre-production, production, editing, he kept, asking for things or wanting things. He'd want something, and we'd say, "Oh, all right. Well, we're happy to do that. If you just triple the budget, I'm sure we can accommodate that." And then he'd back off, right? But this went on continuously. Eventually we left the picture when we got into, a conflict with him, as we were doing almost daily in the editing room, where he had just one of the directors had cut a scene, was happy with it, got the flu, was out for like 2 weeks. Michael got very antsy and nervous, and he got the editor and he said, I want to recut the scene. We have to do something. He recut the scene, turned it into like nonsense, like incomprehensible, basically. And Tom, whose scene it was, flew off the handle, and I couldn't blame him. And we sort of, mutually decided that there was a lot of screaming, and then we just said, all right, we can't do this. We just can't do this anymore.
Yeah.
It was a very abusive relationship, unfortunately.
Yeah. And and the monsters in it are so great. Everything in there is so great. Like the actors, they're so funny, and everything seems like it was supposed to work. And then you kind of watch the movie, and there's things that don't. And then whenever you start,
because he hired originally an editor who then who told him, "Oh, well, you have a 2 hour and 20-minute rough cut, but almost none of it is usable." I don't think that's possible for any movie. I mean, it would have to be basically incompetent on every single level.
Yeah.
So she conned him, and I use the word con very knowingly. I later learned, and I just learned this in the past couple of years, she did this on another person's movie. Another director had shot a feature. It was, in the cutting stage. She got into the cutting room somehow. And then the next thing he knew, suddenly she was directing stuff and cutting her version of it.
Wow.
There are people like this in the business, unfortunately.
Oh, yeah.
She's over the years, when talking to the press or talking to people about it, she's given various versions of what happens, and she's become quieter as the years have gone by. And they attempted to get it, because we did a documentary that's on our Blu-ray set, and they attempted to get a hold of her to be part of that and to give her input on what. They couldn't get her. They did finally hear from her after the disc had been released. And, it really came down to, I felt, and I guess will always feel, that she was an opportunist. She saw a situation. She realized, oh, all right, maybe first she probably thought, oh, I can maybe direct some stuff and get some kind of a directing credit. Because, oh, well, if my stuff is more than 50% of what the final cut is, I can claim top director's credit.
Wow.
That's it.
Wow.
Yeah.
So let's go to the Blu-ray real quick, because it's a fantastic transfer. Did you ever think you'd see that movie look that good?
I'm still dealing psychologically with a lot of what's gone on since the release of that disc. No, seriously, you have to realize this film, it not only was just a disaster for us at the time, because we thought, oh, all right, this is our stepping stone up to regular movie making. And unfortunately, it's although we are in the credits, we got drastically demoted. We felt like we couldn't really take credit for the film. The finished film was not what we had in mind. All of our stuff was changed, cut in ways we were unhappy with. So for, I guess, I don't know, up until maybe the past 5 years, I think we distanced ourselves from it, because I didn't know what else to do. I mean, for years, because you have no idea. I would have, years ago, I would have friends, they'd hear, oh, I heard you made this film Spookies. I go, yeah. And they'd say, oh, please, can we see it? And I go, no. And I'd eventually show it to people. I once showed a couple of friends who had never seen them Street Trash, and they loved it. And then they said, now you have to show us Spookies. And I said, well, I don't know. And I showed them Spookies, and they asked me to turn it off in 10 minutes. And which was kind of like, again, it's like, all right, I keep having to go through this same humiliation. It's just that, as you know, the film has for years gotten far more than its share of terrible reviews. Yeah. And it's now, at least it's now at the status where people think it's a good, bad movie, that it's like, oh yeah, it's got a fucking million problems, but it's entertaining. And it's really very entertaining. And it's got these cool monsters, and it's, and it's got like, other elements that make it watchable. Watching it to try and get the story is a mistake.
Well, I watched it. We were one of the only households, I think, in our small Texas town to have a giant satellite dish in our backyard. So,
right.
So like we grew up watching all of these horror movies and things that kids should not be able to watch. And and then going back to go and revisit Spookies, it's like the only thing that I really remember about it is all the monsters and all the deaths, and it's like, oh, okay, well, so you guys did something that has lasted throughout my entire lifetime, So
well, as I think you're aware, that part of the movie was our movie. The stuff that was added with the sorcerer and the Catman and the bride of the zombies and all this shit.
Yeah.
I think in watching the movie, to me, that just plays as like, all right, we're watching this movie, and then suddenly there's this new scene with a new story with new characters, has nothing to do seemingly with the rest of it, even though they're telling you somehow it does, but it never really connects. And to me, it's like every time you start to watch it and think, all right, here's the story, and you're watching it, suddenly it switches to another story and you're lost again. And it does this repeatedly the entire length of the film. And I think that's part of the reason it's an extremely frustrating viewing experience for some people. For me, it is.
Yeah. I'm surprised there hasn't been a fan out there that has made like sort of a different kind of a different cut of the movie where they chop all those parts out.
Guess what? There is.
Oh, there is.
A guy named Dustin Ferguson is a filmmaker and a friend of mine. He makes micro budget movies. He makes lots of them. He's got a company that's been around for quite a number of years now. He's very successful. He just partnered with the revived Vipco Video in England. But he, he does, shot on video, really tiny budgets, etc. Very simple, basic stuff. But he's got, he does, traditional slasher movies and monster movies, etc. But he's extremely successful. He's got a following. He's got a regular audience, and he's working at a certain level, and he's been really successful at that level. I think that's something that's possible to do now.
Yeah.
And I lost track of your original question.
Oh no! I just want to know why there wasn't a re-edited version with y'all guys' vision.
Oh, because he's such an enormous horror fan. Years ago he cut a fan cut of Spookies, which cut out all those added scenes and just left what we shot, which makes no sense because all the connecting story is cut out. Yeah. But it was like, I appreciated it as a gesture and coming from a fan. It may actually be on YouTube still.
I'm gonna go look for it. So after this horrendous experience, having to deal with all this stuff, what, like, you didn't think about just leaving the business and going and doing something else, or
did you mean while we were making the film?
Yeah. How did you wash that taste?
Well, bear in mind, it was the first film, because we'd been, from before I was out of high school, I was looking to try and make a feature film. And, this happened, we shot Spookies. I was like 27 or something like that. We didn't want to jeopardize it. We wanted our shot. We wanted to get our thing out there and say, hey, we can make films, give us money. And at that time also, the formula was supposed to be, oh, all right, you make a low budget horror movie, it gets sold, it makes some money because they all make money, and then you get your next movie. So that was the plan. Unfortunately, as I said, we sort of receded when it came to like taking credit for the film on its initial release, because I I didn't know how we could approach it. If we criticized Eugenie Joseph, who had shot all the new stuff and edited the final film, I don't know how well we would have come off. It would be impossible to probably get all the information out there to get people to understand that.
Yeah.
And at the same time, I had connections. I knew people at Fangoria and other places, and we had already talked about doing a publicity and a drive and getting stuff written up, and we just backed away from any of that. It's because when the film was ready for release, it's about the only people I even talked to were Joe Kane, who used to write as the Phantom of the Movies for the New York Daily News, reviewing horror and exploitation. And he used to edit a weekly newspaper called the Monster Times.
It sounds awesome.
And he wrote a fair-handed review of the movie. After, because I had written him a letter and said, all right, here's more or less what happened. The critic for Variety was also friendly with us, so I was able to discuss with him before he wrote his review. So he filled in some of the background. So that was a little bit of of a reprieve from having to take credit for the final results. But at the same time, for the most part, the film just sort of came and went without much notice. The Sony video company, which was Sony's first venture into film distribution, had picked up the rights, and they just wanted to get it out there. It was their first theatrical release. That's one thing that most people don't know about Spookies. Spookies is the first theatrical movie ever released by Sony.
Oh wow! Yeah.
Yes.
I didn't know that.
A lot of good it did me.
So where did you go? Did you go to Street Trash next after Spookies?
I had known Roy Frumkes from back before. He was an instructor of mine at the School of Visual Arts. We had been friends for years. We had, talked about doing projects together. We had written some stuff together. I mean, as I was coming off of Spookies, he knew which was at that time Twisted Soul still. He knew he had this film Street Trash that he was going to try and get money for, and he wanted me to come in as the production manager and as an additional producer.
And you're also in that movie, correct?
I am in. You've seen Street Trash?
Yeah.
Then you've seen my dick cut off.
Yeah.
How many people can you have a conversation about that with?
Well, this is definitely the first. Yeah. Did you have to do your own stunts whenever y'all were there?
In that stuff, yeah. I mean, there was nothing that really. I mean, I did a few falls and stuff,
Yeah.
and I was and actually Roy Frumkes wrote that part, which cracked me up at the time because he said, "Oh, I wrote a part for you, right?" And then he'd say, "Oh, it begins on page such and such," and before I read the script, and then I'm like, "What?" It was so unexpected and so beyond the fringe. I mean, even one of our makeup effects people, Jennifer Aspinall, who's since gone on to do major work of all kinds all over the place. I think she recently won an award for the effects on Westworld.
Oh, okay.
I mean, she I mean, almost all the people that did effects with us went on to being top people in the business. But she read the script and she said, "You're not really going to do this scene, are you? It's just in there as a joke, isn't it?" And apparently not. No.
Well, yeah, it's just such an unexpected scene in that movie, but it is one of those things that people talk about when they talk about Street Trash, the tossing of the what were the three names? Is it the three names of the penis? It was Pecker something and something, the different sizes of them.
Oh, right. Yeah. They each had, there was one called the Pecker and there was another one called the Packer.
Yeah.
And meaning that, there was one about this big and then there was one about this big. And the day after I shot the scene, in fact, they'd been tossing this thing around and the smaller one was still 9 inches long or something. It was still huge. Right. So, and it looked like a porn shop dildo, but although it was made specially for Street Trash, and at the time, we're in the office. I'm production manager, and at the same time, bear in mind this is before modern technology of most sorts. So I'm still using a dial telephone. I come in and I sit down at my desk, and the penis has been glued to the dial on the phone and is sticking up in my face. And for a while, I'm like, every time I have to make a call, I'm dialing the phone, and this huge dick is just going around and around. So,
wow, that's hilarious. Okay, so the one thing that really stands out about Street Trash is the effects. Like even now going back and rewatching it, I'm just like, wow, how the hell they do that, and how the hell they do this?
Well, what in particular? Because there have been other Melt movies, and there have been, I mean, there have been like a lot of amazing special effects since Street Trash. I think the effects still hold up.
Yeah, definitely. There's this, well, I mean, even like the most famous one, the one that made the re-release poster of the guy melting in the toilet. Like whenever you see like the bones come out, and just like the simple stuff like that, and then the use of these crazy colors too, of like melting stuff.
Well, that was planned from the start, that people would melt into colors that would be impossible.
Yeah.
And for a long time we debated. We said, all right, we're either going to get like an X or no rating for gore, or we're going to get a G because this is like, a cartoon with whipped cream coming out of people.
Yeah. Street Trash was, it was Street Trash and The Stuff that were huge inspirations for my first film, which is Scum. Oh, that way. Yeah, it's Scum.
Right.
Which we just released after 10 years. And so I got a little bit of this, but like fans start coming out that you didn't know you had. There were, for me, like people that started contacting me like, hey, you're the guy that made that movie. I just watched it. I love it. And can you come on my show? Can you do this and that? I'm sure for you, whenever they released the Street Trash Blu-ray, like that probably opened up a lot of doors too, to allow fans access to you and seek you out, correct?
It has. I had a much lower social media profile at that time, years ago. I mean, well, the internet was a lot younger at that time too.
Yeah.
And to tell the truth, it's like there was still like what a lot of us have actually referred to as the curse of Spookies, meaning we just didn't know how to hold our heads up proudly. We didn't know how to say, oh, all right, well, gee, this sucked, but we, everything else we did is great. And and I had Street Trash, but it's still, that movie, Spookies fucked me up, right? What's happened though in the years since, and more so than ever the past few years, and more so than ever the past year since the Spookies Blu-ray, is that, and it's a change in perceptions too, because now people are constantly saying, oh, I love Spookies, I grew up with Spookies, etc. 10 years ago it was just like, Spookies is terrible, and that was it. That was like the whole of it.
Yeah. And
now it's like, oh, I grew up with this, it means something to me. I was scared. I used to sit there with my friends, and and then you realize, all right, what we created is actually something that people retained. It's like part of their lives. It's not just another movie. That's the amazing thing about it. There's like hundreds of thousands of movies out there, right? And probably lots of them better known by the mainstream, etc. Somehow Spookies is now like receiving love that is would have been impossible to conceive of before.
Yeah. It's just such an interesting thing, because like, you made this movie, such a horrible experience, and then you go about your life and you're doing all this other stuff, and then you kind of just don't think about it. But then you just realize that you have like legions of fans out there that did grow up with this movie, and it is
like I said, I would try to show at times and show people my work, and the problem also with Street Trash is that Street Trash is not like a film for the average viewer. It wasn't at the time, at least. Maybe it's a little more in keeping with the mainstream now, but it's still very offensive to people.
Yeah.
But it wasn't like I could just casually hand it to somebody and say, oh, watch my movie, because I did that on a few occasions, and I had like people never speak to me again, honestly.
Yeah. It's one of those movies that's like, it's like a slice of that generation, because there was so many movies like that take people like me back to childhood, and they like I don't even know if it's possible to do that anymore, to make a movie like that anymore.
In what way? Because I mean, we could technically make it, certainly.
Yeah. Well, no, just the the what do you call that? Like with all the actors in there, there's not really racism in it. And it's really
no, but it's I guess what today they would call edgy, but for us, we just sort of, I mean, the idea was very intentionally to cross the line that you're not supposed to cross on a lot of things, to go, to say, to not be afraid to show something, or not be afraid to do something, or even imply something.
Yeah.
And nowadays I feel, unfortunately, and I also predict this will change, but creators have to be very careful. Like, even if they're not intentionally meaning to offend anybody, they're probably going to offend somebody and have to change something.
Yeah.
And I think that's gotten to a point where it's ridiculous. I sort of feel like, and I think people get very confused about this. It's like I wrote something once that had a character in it, and the character is like hated Jews, and he's anti-Semitic, right?
Yeah.
So somebody reads this and they go, "You're anti-Semitic." I go, well, oh, what? They said, I wrote a character who's supposed to not be a good character, and he's anti-Semitic. He goes, yeah, that must be exactly how you feel.
Yeah.
People cannot separate, the creator from the work in many cases. And the thing is, sometimes you want to show things that are objectionable. So, sometimes you have to show things that are objectionable. In the case of Street Trash, we did it because we wanted to shove it in people's faces, quite honestly.
Yeah. And it's like, for a lot of moments in that movie, it's so politically incorrect. This day, this day and age, but it's like you watch it in the movie and you don't I didn't even blink an eye, because it's just like a time capsule for like those types of movies at that time, and everything that y'all could get away with, which was awesome, and like it's so cool to have that slice of cinema.
And I feel that Street Trash stood out at the time, and it still does, because it has things that a lot of movies, including many classic horror movies of that period, don't have, which is, it's not a formula story. There's lots of interesting characters, meaning that they're it's not that they're deep, but they're interesting. There's like something that provokes you or intrigues you, and we didn't want to do that. I mean, we did everything. The thing, like Spookies, as I said, was we were sort of forced to make a horror movie that was all cliches. This is what we were told we had to do. Okay, that was our job. Street Trash, it was like, all right, anything somebody thinks up, we can talk about it. Maybe we'll do it. Yeah,
and that's always fun. That's what I found with making my first film is like, I nobody all I had to answer to was myself. So. Right. So I could write whatever I wanted to, and then the thing with us is we didn't have like a special effects company or anything. It was us, making our own blood in my kitchen and blowing it out of tubes and all this stuff, So anything we wanted to do, we just had to figure out how to do it, And we basically took over a small town and went and made a movie, and and it was a lot of fun. Okay, so Street Trash is released. How well did it do for you guys? Did it open some more doors?
I mean, it did fine in terms of, I mean, they Vestron Video released it under their Lightning Pictures banner, which was sort of designed for more. If they were releasing tons of horror, they were releasing like virtually all the Charlie Band movies in the 80s and 90s. And Street Trash, they decided they wanted to release specifically as a midnight show in an attempt to make it a cult movie, which at the time I'd never heard of before. And we were very skeptical about that, because it's like, all right, cult movies usually sort of become cult movies because people start to become aware, they talk to each other, and they realize, hey, we all love this movie. To try and like create that and expect people to come, I don't know if that's going to work. And at the time, even though, I mean, it played midnight shows in many cities, and it would come back every now and then, but it didn't become like the Rocky Horror Show or something, which I think was what they were aiming at. But it did get noticed, and people, did like it, but it certainly didn't get the attention that it got, I think, once it got to video. That made the difference.
Yeah. So what happened after that?
Let's see. The film was sold actually for a very nice price. I mean, it made a profit, like, for the investors, right? Fairly swiftly. After that, all of us have gone our separate ways. There are the street trash people over the years. To tell the truth, Jim Muro, who is now, has been for many years one of the top Steadicam operators. Yeah, he did great. He's got credits on so many major movies. He's directed. He's done a lot of television recently. So that really worked out very well for him. I would say that the rest of us probably had a more difficult time. Roy has gone on and continued to do stuff over the years. I felt he probably deserved more success than he's had with certain things. And I have, I worked with my two Spookies partners before that. We did Spookies. And then after Spookies, after Street Trash, I continued to work with one of them, who was Thomas Doran, who I basically for years was, on the phone with or consulting with every day. And we had like endless projects we tried to get financing for. Most of my filmmaking career has been writing stuff, trying to get money, failing, writing something else, repeat the cycle again, again and again, because in terms of financing something, there's always like a new situation that comes up, and it's like, oh, the thing that you have is not what they want. You have to come up with some other thing that will be appropriate for whatever they're looking for at the moment. Then you do that, and then again, repeat. It just it was just again, we felt like almost like we were starting from scratch, because although I could say, I produced 2 theatrical independent films that have gotten some attention, have made money, and I couldn't get anybody to take me seriously. And at times it drove me crazy, because I couldn't understand. I would walk in and say, all right, I've done this, I made this. And they go, yeah, I heard of Spookies, but I couldn't, it's like there were people who with far less credibility, credits, and to be quite honest, talent, who seemed to be more able to get to financing than myself. I think part of it is that I don't play the game very well, meaning I don't always humor everybody I talk to as much as maybe I should, and I tend to be honest and blunt about what I think. But at the same time, I don't know really how to be any other way, and even more so now that it's like, I want to do something good. I can't. And we had already had the experience on Spookies. If we said yes to a lot of stuff we didn't agree with or wanted to do, and it did not work in the end.
Yeah. So what is your writing process like? Do you wake up in the morning, coffee, sit down? How's it
that
work?
Depends. If I'm really on something and I have something and I have a defined deadline and I want a certain amount of work done within a certain time, I'll do that, and I'll get up and I'll hopefully work like 5 hours straight before I even think about anything else. But that varies a lot. I mean, like recently, I'm right now writing a follow-up script to Spookies.
Oh, really?
Which is going to be, I think, totally like out beyond the parameters of anything anyone is expecting, and hopefully a good movie for this time, on my level of good. But
was that
at the moment? What
was that even something that you would have considered years ago?
A sequel?
Yeah.
Well, first of all, we didn't know, because the film was still pretty much universally panned everywhere there was any writing about it. Most people who saw it didn't like it, except I started, slowly over the years, I'd read, as the internet got filled with thousands of fan reviews and things like that, you'd say, all right, well, people actually did like this. They do understand that, despite everything, we had some pretty good special effects, that there was something there. It wasn't just another slapdash, like, fuck the audience, we just want your money.
Yeah.
So I think, I think I mean, we were talking about writing process. My writing process changes at times. I mean, right now I'm working on this sequel, right? I wrote a very longer than usual. Like I wrote like a 50-page treatment. Usually I sometimes write a treatment, sometimes I don't. But this was like really, like boom, boom, boom. Almost every scene that would be in the script is here, and you have an idea of what's happening. But at the same time, I wanted to limit it, and I went for 50 pages because I don't know about you, but it's very difficult to get people to read things, even if they tell you they're dying to read it. You know what I'm saying? It's like, oh, I have to read it. I have to read it. And then like, here it is. And, 7 years later that.
Well, I have like a 51-page script that's not complete. And I gave it to a buddy of mine. He really wanted to read it. And he's had it for 2.5 weeks, 3 weeks. Yeah. It still hasn't finished it. So yeah, I get it. But so what I was just to finish that up, what I was going to say is what I'm doing right now. I wrote this treatment, but at the same time, and I wanted to keep it short, but at the same time, lots of ideas were occurring to me. So everything that came into my head, like a lot of dialogue, a lot of ideas about the characters, etc., I just made separate notes. So I'm right now in the process of incorporating all these notes, and I've still got like tons of notes to go through, and I've got like over 100 pages of script. So I mean, I'm coming along pretty nicely, and it's much easier it's always easier to subtract than to add. Oh yeah.
So I think, and for me that's good, because a lot of times I don't know how you write, but I have stuff that just pops into my head out of nowhere, like all the time, and I have to write it down, or it's gone. And I can suddenly, it's like, people who hear voices in their head think they're crazy. And maybe I'm crazy, but at least I have a purpose for the voices in my head, and I appreciate it.
Well, yeah, it's I'm like, to me, that's one of those things too, where it's like, I love those voices. And where do those voices come from? I don't know, but they give me some pretty cool ideas.
They're part of you, but at the same time, it's like sometimes you like I'll have a conversation that takes place in my head that I gotta get this into the script, and it may be something that tells me more than I already knew about the characters. But it just seemed, it literally, as you know, it seems to just come out of nowhere. It's literally like some force that's just saying, oh, here, how would you like to use this?
Yeah. And like the fun thing too is like whenever you're writing characters, well, at least for me, I'm writing characters and they're talking back and forth. So, I'm writing the dialogue, and then all of a sudden they just go off on their own, and they just start talking to each other. And then whenever the scene's done, you're just like, oh, wow, they're the ones that did it.
Right. No, it's like you're not consciously creating it. It's like it's like almost like you're just listening to it, and it's like you're saying, all right, well, hold on a minute, let me get that down.
Yeah.
And that's great, because that to me is like, those are very pleasurable times, because it's like, as if by magic or forces, beyond your humanity, something is being brought to you.
Yeah.
Whereas other times, as I'm also sure you struggle to figure out what it is you want to say and exactly how you should say it.
Yeah. And that's like why one of the questions I hate getting is, oh, where do you get your ideas? And it's like, well, if I knew where I got my ideas, I'd go get them all the time. They just pop up. See, and the thing that I think too is for writers and creatives, we kind of come with an antenna that is up really, really high, and it catches these strange waves of ideas and things that some people can't, and then there's some people whose antenna's higher than others, and they can create more, or it's pointed in a different direction, so like there's just this weird way where we just kind of capture these ideas.
Right. And I think if you're creative, you may hear something or see something and take something from it that other people aren't going to.
Yeah,
that leads you to like a much broader field of ideas. And it's like, it's because your thought process and your experience has interpreted that and sort of inspired you in a way that maybe no one else could be inspired.
Yeah. Like my first book, I Wear My Sunglasses at Night, was inspired by the song whenever I was a kid. I just always figured it was about that the song was about vampires, because who else would be wearing sunglasses at night, you know? And then so I grew up telling people that, and they're like, oh, I never thought about that. I was like, I thought about that when I was a kid, and finally I wrote a book about it, you know? And so yeah, it's just one of those things, you know. It can't be explained. But is there anything you can tell us about Spookies, the sequel?
It is myself and my partner Tom Doran, who passed away a few years ago, and that was really a striking blow to me, because we were very much in tune with each other creatively. We were able to really our tastes and aesthetics were very close. I really trusted him, he trusted me. So I miss having that kind of give and take with somebody that I don't have to hesitate. You know, in a lot of other cases, even if someone is like creative or I like their work and I'm working with them, I may have to go through pains to make something clear, or to try and get someone on my level to see what I'm seeing. But Tom and I, you know, we did it almost telepathically, and he was so wildly creative. He would come up with ideas literally almost every day. He'd say, "Oh, I came up with an idea," and then he'd send me a paragraph and an email and say, "What do you think of this?" I go, "That's fucking great." And you go, "Yeah, you can have it. I'll never be able to do anything with it. I'll never have a chance."
Wow. So is this sequel? Are you trying to bring the team back together? Whoever's on?
At the moment, I've been doing the script, and the script is based. Tom and I had some discussions about a sequel. He had already, for years, long prior to the Blu-ray release, Tom and I spent years trying to see if we could get rights to Spookies and do a Blu-ray set much like the one that was put out ourselves, because we didn't think anybody else was going to, because the film had gotten so little attention over the years.
Yeah.
And we did a lot of detective work, and we talked to people in film archives and in film libraries. We talked to people in the film labs in New York City. And we were trying to, first of all, we were trying to find out if any of the original footage existed. And we covered as many, places and as many people as we thought might be able to help us in some way. And we discovered pretty much nothing. And all things seem to be pointing back to the fact that Michael Lee, despite the fact that he had sold rights to the film off to Vestron at one point, actually, Vestron didn't release it in the US, but they did get rights and they released it overseas. And in the Library of Congress, and probably in the listing that's still online for the Library of Congress, Spookies is owned by Vestron, but it's not, because the rights reverted to Michael Lee.
Yeah. And
it was just recently he was approached by Vinegar Syndrome, and Vinegar Syndrome didn't just buy, distribution rights. They bought all rights. They are now world rights holders to Spookies.
Oh, wow.
Which is good, because it makes it at least simpler for me, certainly, in anything that happens in the future. But at the time, we backed off, because Tom and I knew if we went to Michael Lee, he would laugh and tell us to fuck ourselves.
So you're writing it. Any talks with the original?
Well, all right, I'm sorry. I keep sidetracking here.
It's okay.
But Tom and I talked about it, and we had a few ideas. And now the original title of Spookies, what became Spookies, was Twisted Souls, right? So we had actually written another treatment for a story for something really low budget, like $100,000 movie called Twisted Souls, right? Which was about these people living in an old hotel, and there's some kind of creature in the basement that's, draining energy from them and all this shit. And so Tom said, "Hey, I've had an idea. Why don't we? There's an idea. I think we could do that as a Spookies follow-up based on our old idea from the original Twisted Souls that we use the title from." And we talked about it, and we had some conversations here and there. Now, Tom before this had at least a dozen times had conversations with me and says that there's no audience for a sequel to Spookies. There's barely an audience for Spookies. He says, "I am not writing a sequel to Spookies. I don't want to be associated with it. I don't want to have this to be my legacy. I refuse to have anything to do with it." Right? So then we talked about it a little. And at the time, I was I was working a job that was taking up all my time. I was working in Pakistani television, of all things, in a studio here on the East Coast. And Tom wrote a few pages of an outline. right? And I was like floored because it's like, like overnight he suddenly came up with this. I was like, oh, okay, great. Thank you for doing this. I just didn't have the time to even think about it. And it was good. And I thought there was potential there. And it's much more ambitious. It's not even so much a sequel. There are direct references, but I wrote it in such a way that if, like Vinegar Syndrome said, oh, we want like an outrageous amount of money for the rights to call this a sequel, I could just modify it slightly and it wouldn't really matter. But it's much more expansive. It's much more of a movie, in my opinion. It's ambitious. It is. I'm really, for my sake and for Tom, and this is what we wanted to do, what we talked about at the time before he passed away. We wanted to do something that we could be proud of. We could say, all right, whatever you think of what we did, here's what we can do.
Yeah.
So that's what I'm aiming for right now. And so far, the reaction to the treatment has been excellent. I mean, I've gotten like solid responses. I'm just about on the verge of starting to go a little public with what's going on with it. I don't. My ex-partner Brendan Faulkner. I don't know if he's going to be involved or not. He may be involved. But my partner Tom's widow, who was also one of our art directors, she designed a lot of things in the film. She made the Ouija board in Spookies.
Oh, okay.
She's been like involved in like sort of going through this whole process with me because she has access to all of Tom's old records and notes. And so we've tried as much as possible. I mean, we've just taken dialogue and stuff he's written from other stuff he wrote in the past and it's now in this new project as a way to get more of him into it. And plus it's new material. Yeah. So I'm feeling good about that. But this new thing also is Spookies is often referenced as a horror comedy, and I think a lot of the comedy aspect was not there when we were working on it. And I also think that what happened is after they redid the film and turned it into Spookies, probably the first few audiences they showed it to laughed at it a lot, and so they decided, oh, it's a horror comedy. But that was not the intention.
Yeah.
Okay. This is an intentional horror comedy, and I want it to be both as horrific in some ways as possible and as insane and fun and funny as possible. I want this to, if nothing else, I want people to say, "Damn, I had such a great time. I really didn't expect to have this good a time." Yeah.
Well, do you feel any pressure because the original is so beloved by?
No, I feel no pressure because I could have a wet dream and it would be better than Spookies. I mean, I don't mean to say that, and this is no offense to all those wonderful people who love the film, etc. But try and understand, the love for what's there aside, that even when the film was entirely ours, it was a film that was compromised every step of the way. That like we had to get approval on like literally every word of dialogue, every idea, every turn of the plot, everything.
Yeah.
From someone who really was not equipped to be able to pass judgment on these things. I think then, and I think more so now, that we were capable of a lot more and a lot better.
Yeah. Well, it's like whenever I saw the movie and then you start hearing the backstory and then you're saying that you're going to do a follow-up, then all of a sudden I'm excited because now maybe we'll get to see your guys' vision through the entire project now.
I hope so, yes.
Yeah.
So far, I mean, as I told you, I've been getting a good initial response. There are some exciting casting possibilities that I can't confirm yet, but they're like beyond anything I expected.
Wow.
And two of the original effects people have agreed to come back already, including like Gabe Bartalos, who was really the head of our monster effects, and who went on to do stuff like Leprechaun and dozens and dozens of movies.
Wow. It sounds great. It sounds like it's going to be a lot of fun. I can't wait to hear more. So.
Well, more than anything, that's what it has to be. It has to be fun. The tone maybe to some extent, not exactly the same, but it's like, have you seen the recent film Psycho Gorman?
Yes, I have. Yes, I have. Yes,
right?
that movie took me back to my childhood also. And like they don't
Right.
make these movies anymore, you know?
But I got the feeling with that also. For me, I was interested in seeing it, and I didn't know if it would be what I expected, but it pretty much came through. It was just like a hell of a lot of fun. The kids in it were great. You know, the little girl, the little you know, psycho who is, you know, controlling the monster and everything.
Yeah.
Great stuff. It really worked. From what I know, they're doing a sequel to it already, which I expected.
Yeah. Yeah, and like it's funny whenever you read like interviews with the director, he was at first he was like, "Oh, I didn't even think anybody was gonna watch it. I didn't think anybody was gonna like it." But now that I'm hearing all this stuff, well, yeah, let's make a sequel, you know. So
yeah, well it's weird because what's happened is that thanks mostly to the ability of people to communicate online and technology making a lot of things easier. There's more, I mean, fans have so much more input into like filmmakers and what films are possibly going to get made. You know what I'm saying? I mean, it's like there was a time that, you know, somebody would propose, oh, we're going to do a sequel to this, and it would be like total guesswork. They'd have like no solid idea as to whether there was going to be an audience. Now you know almost immediately.
yeah. Well, and it's like one of the mainstream crazy ones is the whole Snyder cut of Justice League. You know, like that all started with fans like on Twitter, you know, saying they wanted to see the Snyder cut, and then here we are, and it's released.
Right, and that's like unprecedented in so many ways, because it's not just Zack Snyder getting to make the film he wanted to make; it's Zack Snyder being given all the money that he could possibly want to make something beyond what he originally wanted to do, because he didn't think he'd have that much money.
Yeah. It was just crazy whenever they announced it. I was like, wow, the fans have spoken. Well, you know, it's even like that to a certain point with your movies on Blu-ray. You know, it's like you get to see the love, and it's like the fans have spoken, you know, and they were just
that ultimately means more. It means more to you as a filmmaker than all the critics' reviews, all of the official recognition, when actual people respond, I mean, for me, like the greatest experience, and I've had this with, you know, with other films in the past, but like I didn't have it with Spookies until the first time I saw it in a theater a few years ago with an audience that was totally primed and eager to see it, and they loved it. And it's like, I felt like I had been transported into another dimension or something, because it's like the only other time I'd seen it in the theater is I saw it opening weekend on Times Square in a Broadway theater, where there were like, you know, maybe 4 other people in the entire theater, and you know, it was hard to gauge the audience response.
Yeah, that's got to be amazing. People are asking me about if, you know, if they can book my movie, and like there's, I don't know about you, but I know for me, there's like there's something inside where it's just kind of like, really, like I'm done with that movie, you know, like I did it, thank you for the love, but I'm also doing this, and I've done this, and you know, and it's like now people just want to talk to me about that. So,
well, the thing is, it's hard, you know, that's the thing too, is you start to realize that fans will probably become fixated on one thing or another or several things, and sometimes you may feel, oh, but this is my best work, and they have no interest.
Yeah.
You know, hopefully, I don't think that's always true, though. I think because of the stuff I mentioned before, fans are now more of a part of the process of getting films made, especially with certainly with the horror field. But I think I think that's like a really important relationship to cultivate, and if the bigger companies really, you know, a few years ago, they realized that the fan market was really important, and suddenly they started to go to conventions and have a presence, start marketing their movies like crazy there, because they finally understood that, gee, all these movies that are making the most money now are the kind of stuff that is either comic book movies or comic book like movies, and that's the kind of stuff we just like ignored for decades.
Yeah. Okay, so hopefully we'll get to see hopefully we'll get to revisit the world of Spookies. Is there any sort of timeline?
I'm hoping to finish up a script within a couple of months. I have been, speaking to people. I am looking at a certain budget, which is bigger than the original Spookies budget. It's sort of, I mean, I was thinking of it in terms of the, what would the Spookies budget be adjusted for inflation? But a lot of things have also changed, and a lot of things, I want to stick with practical effects, for instance, right? But practical effects have come a long way since then. There are a lot.
Yeah.
There are a lot more methods to do things and get certain kinds of results. Bear in mind on Spookies, generally, as we were, shooting the film, we, all right, here's the first scene of this monster, and we would just like try and make it work because we had just gotten the monster put together. We had done no tests. We had like no way of knowing what was going to work. And with practical effects on set, that's where your budget goes. It goes to people standing around endlessly, an entire crew waiting for like blood to drip the right way or something.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's like now I'm pretty sure there's like a whole army of special effects guys out there that that grew up from this movie that want to really go back and work on it with you, like.
Yeah, no, I've had like a number of people inquire. I don't think we'll have a problem putting together a terrific, not just a good effects team, but people who are all, enthused because they're fans of something that they're now getting to be a part of.
Yeah. Is there any plans to revisit Street Trash?
Street Trash has been, I mean, a sequel was talked about off and on for years. Nothing really ever came of it. It wouldn't be that easy considering a lot of the main characters were killed. I mean, I solved that with Spookies by just taking the whole thing to another direction. I don't need any of those characters, really.
Yeah.
I think, let's see, Street Trash also, I mean, there's a comic book out by Mike Lackey, who's one of the original stars of Street Trash.
Oh, yeah.
He's been, publishing it, issue by issue for a few years. A sequel to Street Trash would probably be weird because we probably have to involve some of the original characters, but not necessarily that many.
Yeah.
Again, I think, if someone had a Street Trash sequel ready to put out to the public tomorrow, people would want it. It just, the financing hasn't come.
Yeah. Is there something that you've always wanted to write and get made that you haven't, say like your dream project? Do you have one of those?
Like I have about 100 of them. No, seriously, because there's some things that I just think are like such. For me, just to get interested enough to write something, I have to need to see the movie. I have to like come up with an idea, and then I have to say, gee, I would really like to see this. And then I have to make the movie that I would like to see. And it has to be better than my original thought. It has to just become better and better. And I mean, I have a number of things. I have a futuristic crime and prison sort of film noir thing that I've wanted to do for years. I'm a comedy writer too, and I've had probably, in terms of selling or optioning scripts, I've had more luck with my comedy material than horror stuff. Yeah, I mean, I've come somewhat close to getting some stuff made. But I think that may be my greatest strength, just because I think I write comedy of a sort that I don't think is that common nowadays.
Well, all right.
Meaning funny, because I haven't seen a good comedy movie in a long time.
It has been quite some time. Yeah.
And part of that is because I think all the good comedy writing went to like television and direct streaming and stuff like this. And there is good stuff out there, but the comedy, film that stuff you remember from, many years from coming from Hollywood, I don't see that stuff anymore. And it's got to be because it's not making the money that it was.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I don't know. You gave me all the info I needed, sometimes more, which was awesome. I love it. I don't know. Is there anything else you want to add? Anything you want to say?
No, I mean, I'm good. I again, as I've done before, I just want to again thank fans of my films, thank people who love movies as much as I do. the love that's been shown Spookies since the end of 2019 has changed my life. It's opened up more doors than anything has in a long time. It's got people telling me like almost every day or every other day that they love my movies, which is, it really just doesn't, it's like I literally hear that and I keep thinking, all right, what am I hearing? What is, I can't believe this is possible.
Yeah. Yeah, well, and like it's great too because like it got you out there more, and now we're sitting here talking, so I'm
Yeah, and
appreciative of that.
it's like because I'm such a big fan too. It's like I really understand, because there are times I've met filmmakers who I really appreciate, or just had the opportunity to shake the hand of someone that I admire, and it's like it's a pleasure to be able to tell someone that they've brought you great happiness in something.
Yeah, and I totally agree. Yeah, I don't know. That's all I got.
Yeah, I mean, I'm good for the moment, but if you want to do another session sometime, I'm fine. I don't know. For some reason, I got like a lot of podcast offers this week.
Oh, really?
I don't know. Is there something going on the internet? I got like within 2 days, I had like 4 podcast requests. Then I checked my Facebook, and I've had in the past 2 days, I've had like 40 friend requests, and I have no idea what that's from.
Huh? Yeah, I don't know.
It's like I just went through like 20 of them, and then like a few hours later, there's another 20. It's like, what? I don't know. Somehow somebody found out about me.
Yeah. Well, hey, that's awesome though. It's
And I will tell you also that the sequel title is tentatively, and this can't possibly say because no distributor will agree, but we're calling it Twisted Souls 2 Spookier.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Yeah. I'll buy it.
Okay, good. I'll write that down. Okay.
All right, Frank. Well, hey, I really appreciate you taking an hour out of your day.
I'm so glad we got a chance to talk. And like I said, happy to do it again. And, there's always more stuff we can cover. And hopefully in a few months, there'll be more stuff in progress to talk about.
Definitely. Yeah. Feel free to hit me up on Facebook or however, and
Okay.
yeah. And then I follow you. So, I'll
Right.
keep
As soon as you post this, I'll get the word out to as many people as I can.
Okay, cool. All right. Well, thank you very much.
Thank you. All right. I appreciate it. And I wish you a very good day.
You too. Thank you, sir.